Good morning. I am Lauren Cook, your Dean of College and Gap Year is Advising, as you know, hopefully. As always, have a couple of just instructions up top as we get started. Everybody's on mute right now. Please stay on mute until we get to sort of Q&A time. I will let you know when that's happening, but we have some content up top, of course. And then we'll do questions for the balance of the time. We're going to give ourselves an hour here. So whether we get all the way through the questions or not, we will pause at 9. And this is being recorded, so I will send out a recording if you have to leave before we're finished, so you can see the end. And I'm really excited that today our sort of guest speakers, and last month we had Miss Beck. This week we've got a handful of senior parents who have just made it over the finish line. May 1st was Monday, which if you don't have it in your calendar for next year, junior parents, that's it. That's your finish line. So everyone had a plan post JCHS by basically the end of business on Monday. So I'm really appreciative of these folks who've just crossed the finish line to be ready to talk about it already. So, but before we get to them, I have just a couple of updates about what's happening with juniors at school. If your child is not especially communicative with you, know that I am currently working my way through second official meetings with juniors. Some of your kids have been in my office more often than that. But we are doing this check-in at the end of the year to see if they are doing any college research, and if so, what they've thought of that, any tours you guys might have taken during spring break or other times during the year, making sure that they are putting some things in their following column on score and engaging with that. And if they're not, we're doing that in the meeting. We are checking in on testing. I know some, segment of the class will not be testing. Some of you have gotten testing done already, and some have it to come. So I'm just kind of making sure that's on track. And then we are talking about teacher recommendations and finalizing who of at least 2, if not maybe 3 people, they will be requesting by the end of the year to write recommendations for them. And we do want for the timeline to have JCHS teachers have those requests going into the summer, because some will work on drafts over the summer. Some may wait until the fall, but I want them to have an idea of their workload, since the turnaround is pretty quick when we come back in the fall. So that's all been happening. And then next week, we have another layer of things coming. I will be in every English class next week launching the college essay unit. And I will also be sending out to the students one final shorter, but still they need to take it seriously, questionnaire to complete by the end of the school year. And I'm just asking some follow-up questions about, what are they doing with their summer, and how have things been going this semester and whatnot. So that's what's happening with my interaction with your kids. And now I want to get into a conversation with some of our senior parents. I don't know if I should call you experts if you feel like experts, but I think once you've gone through all of this, you've got some layer of expertise to talk about. So Melissa Heller, mother of Isley Douglas, Doug Crane, mother of Mira, and Patty Joslowitz. Tell me, I never say it quite correctly, I think. Is it a moving target, Patty? Okay, mother of Eliza, have all just crossed the finish line. Well, some in different times over the past couple of months. And I'm really delighted that they're willing to say a little bit about what their journey has been like this past year. So I've got just a couple of questions for them. We're going to have them be a little bit of a panel, and then we'll open it up for everyone to ask questions, either of them or of me. So the first thing I'm wondering is, you think about this past year and where you might have been at last May as your child was trying to put a list in SCORE and you were trying to engage them with thinking about potential colleges. What was the moment or how you got your child, or I got your child to fully engage with the process? Because I know this is a moment where some are engaged and some maybe are feeling a little lukewarm about it, or maybe fully avoidant. So anyone have thoughts on what and when your kids got going? Yeah, Doug.
I'll start it out. I think it was a process to get Mira fully engaged. I think it's still sort of hard for for the kids to, uh, sometimes fully get into it. I think, introducing her to the FISC guide, which was, in my opinion, a very helpful book, something that had, a good write-up on things, and then also had, comparable schools. I forget if that's the exact word, but they have a listing at the end of each section that kind of gives you some other schools that you might look at if you think that this one school is interesting. And that's good if you don't know all the schools. And Mira really found that, I think, very helpful to kind of give her a quick or kind of start to really get into finding schools that she could put on her list, putting them into, score. I think all of that sort of helped her get engaged in the process. Um, and Yeah, and I really, that kind of built up into around this time going into the summer, thinking about whether there would be, some places that we might want to visit over the summer, and just getting prepared for the fall. So, yeah.
Great.
So Isley is my second to go through this process. And I think she benefited from the fact that she was, she watched her older brother go through the process. So I think there was already a pretty keen interest in, okay, what's next? But I highly recommend tours of local schools just to get a sense of what does a really big school feel like? What does a small liberal arts college feel like? What's a school that focuses on football and sports and things of that nature? And just for them to be on a campus and not have that immediate pressure. I think that when we first did a round of tours, which we did with our son, and I brought Isley along, it was very much these may not be schools that are right for you. And personally, I'd like you to be further than 15 minutes away. But let's experience it, ask your questions, kind of get your feet wet in a really safe environment almost. So I think that lit a little bit of a fire under Isley when we sort of revisited that idea. Also, anytime we were traveling or going and visiting grandparents or anything, just driving through different campuses, getting a feel for what schools are like on the East Coast where my son happens to go to school, or, in the Midwest, and just trying to help her understand, like, oh no, you really do need to pay attention to weather. That's a real thing. Like, I think Bay Area kids kind of forget that it rains and snows and can be gray and freezing in certain places throughout the year. And so really making sure you acknowledge that and try visiting places when you're buried in snow, if that's, if those are schools that they're really considering.
Great. Thanks, Patty.
Yeah, I would say Lisa was late to really get into it. She followed all of Miss Cook's leads and, create a list, although it wasn't like a real list until definitely into senior year. So she was excited about college, but not ready to let go of JCHS. And so I think she spent a lot of time, because also their workload does not let up. I don't remember that from my experience in high school. I remember us doing like nothing senior year, but that was probably more about me. So she was really busy and had a ton of work. And so she was very, very focused on that. And I really relied on Miss Cook to lead the way in terms of this actually needs to happen now. And like Elisa's first list was basically whatever Miss Cook said in her initial list. And very slowly we eliminated or added schools. And I asked Elisa when she thought she got really into the process, and she thinks the beginning of this year, senior year. And I would say more like winter break, maybe a little later, that she really engaged. So, yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. So as we think about then really getting into it, or maybe, this was getting them into it, but was there a most challenging part of this, or conversely, a most rewarding moment, or maybe both as you went on this journey?
I'd say the most challenging thing, aside from please write your essays, please write your essays, please write your essays, is eliminating the chatter and the noise and really trying to empower your kid to focus on what's right for them and to stop listening to everyone around them who, oh yeah, I looked at that school and I hated it because of this. Like, a little chatter is great, but it can be really, really overwhelming. And so trying to, I think, create a little bit of that like bubble where, how about conversations of school about, colleges exist with you and Miss Cook and you and us. And we try to not make it like all, 12 of your closest friends sitting there discussing where you're all possibly applying together or not. And that's definitely a challenge. The reward is when they finally have that moment, I think, of realizing that they need to find the school that's right for them and not the school that's right for their friends.
Thank you so much for saying that. And I'm going to just echo that, because I found, especially with this year's senior class, it's been a big change since before the pandemic in terms of how transparent they're been with each other about where they're applying and how they feel and what's the process going, and I hate that, if I'm being honest. I want them to share and have conversations with each other. And I think it helps the peer culture if they're all talking about college, but they don't need to be in each other's business in the same way, because if you get all excited about a first choice school and you tell everyone you're applying and then you don't get in, it's like the old advice of like, you don't have to tell people that you're going for your driver's license test, just tell them when you got it after, right? And so I always try and encourage some level of confidentiality and discretion, and, maybe choose a list of advisors, your own little team of a couple of close friends, but you don't have to walk around broadcasting it. And I've watched that really cut both ways this year. So as much as you all can help me in terms of asking them to think about like the limits between where their process starts and, their friends starts, and where the end point is on all of that. So anyway, yes. So Doug, I see you're unmuted. What do you
No,
have?
I unmuted. Yeah, I mean, I would certainly echo what Melissa said as well, but I do think that it was challenging to kind of really focus on what schools Mira wanted to apply to. There's so many different options, and really to then think about what she wants, what's going to be good for her. There's so many different things that factor into that in terms of location and what the school, what's the size, and what does it have, the programs that you have, what's the kind of the culture at the school, what's the Jewish life like. So there were a number of different things, and kind of really trying to put your head around all that is certainly a challenge. And I think then too, even thankfully she had a few choices at the end, and even narrowing down that final choice at the end was also certainly a challenge. I think for the most rewarding certainly was that light bulb moment, like okay, this is where I'm going to decide to go. And I think the sort of the relief of I'm gonna, I've made my decision, and then really going with it. I would also say it was certainly rewarding to think, she had her list of where she was applying. That was a big moment. And even, getting that first application in and then getting to the point where they're finally done. All those were certainly, each one was a rewarding moment of just, wow, that's that milestone that you've completed. So.
Yeah, and I will say, especially if you apply to Common App schools in the last year or two, they've added like confetti, electronic confetti when you hit submit, which is kind of nice. Makes you
Yeah.
feel like you did something. So yeah. Patty.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the confetti. Yeah, just exactly what Melissa and Doug have shared. And I didn't anticipate how amazing it would feel to say no to the schools that she was not going to, and then say like that final yes. And it was, we knew we had an idea of what she was going to do, but actually doing it is enormously uplifting, gratifying, and really exciting. So.
So if you had to give some advice to this class about to start the serious part of the process, what might that be?
I would start it off, and I promise you this is not a plant, but I would say really follow Ms. Cook's plan. It's a very good plan. I found it to really be not only supportive and helpful for Mira in terms of her keeping pace, knowing when she had to do things, but helpful for us as parents to be able to see where she's at. And that would be the first piece of advice. I found the suggested schools helpful, many of which were ones that Mira did apply to, and one was one ultimately that she decided to go to. I think just taking it sort of the one step at a time. Don't it can be overwhelming and sort of not try to just take it one step at a time. And that goes maybe those essays, and I think Melissa mentioned that before. That's tough, and it's kind of thinking about if they're applying to multiple schools, just trying to pace yourself and have that laid out, and not try to do everything all at once. And then lastly, I've seen in this process, not necessarily at JCHS, but in other seniors that we know, some of the difficulties in sort of not having, too many reach schools, really having that balanced, having, reach schools, likely schools, possible schools, things to that extent. If it's possible, not always possible, to really the schools that you're applying to really be able to feel comfortable that could be a place that you could want to go, and be good with that, and not have it be that if it's only one school and if you don't get in, just try to get to a point where you can be comfortable with a range of schools. So anyway.
Thanks.
I 100% agree with Doug, and that's the first thing that came to mind. And really, it's listen to Ms. Cook. She's done this. She's the expert. She knows, from being on the other side of the desk, so to speak, when she was in admissions, to all of her involvement in associations now. And she was 100% on the money when it came to likely and possible. We didn't do any like total reach schools. But even though Ms. Cook said that those were likely that she'll get in, I was still so nervous just because of other friends that I have and the stories that you hear about nobody gets in anywhere. And, there's a lot of noise out there. So I tried to really just listen to what Ms. Cook was saying. And also if there was something I was not able to get across to Eliza, that I could send an email to Ms. Cook and she could bring it up with her. So you don't have to be the bad guy. Ms. Cook is happy to be the bad guy, and she's a great bad guy. So I would really recommend using her. She's amazing. Thank you.
I feel like that's a t-shirt. I'm a great bad guy. So yes, please listen to Ms. Cook because she's a great bad guy. So my little words are parent, your kids need you. I mean, I was actually talking with Ms. Cook about this before, that I feel like it's very much a kid-led process, but they still can't necessarily always fully make decisions. And this is a big decision. It's probably the biggest one they've made. And to really feel like you're present as an adult who comes with some wisdom and perspective that they may not have. I also think to, as much as possible, ignore the rankings of schools and really focus on what school's right for your child. There's something kind of fun about turning down higher ranked schools, if you will, and knowing like, hey, I got in there, but this is where I belong. And on the note of following your child, if you have a child who's really passionate about a school, really falls in love with the school, and you can see them there, I'm a big advocate personally of early decision. My older child did that process and it was fantastic, but he 100% really was committed to this school. Unfortunately did get in, but had other options and got all his applications out and was ready to not get in. And on that note, I would try to get as much done early as possible, because senior year is not fun. There's a lot going on. And therefore, as much as they can conquer as early as possible, at least from a draft perspective and all of those things, the better they're going to feel, I think, going into the process. So, yeah, right early and often.
Yeah, I just want to add to what Melissa said, and I wholeheartedly agree. Is in addition to early decision or early action, if for some schools having the option of applying early without necessarily being committed to the school, we found, and especially ones that don't require you to, that you have to be the only one that you applied to. So Mira actually applied to 3 schools early action, and the thought process was if she got into one of those schools, then at least she would know, wouldn't necessarily have to be, and we found that, knowing that she had at least gotten in somewhere in December, but that she didn't have to go to that school, but that still was important in terms of heading into winter break, things like that. So we thought that worked, at least for Mira, and I could see that was a good thing.
Great. All right. Well, before we open it up for questions, I'm wondering if we can just go down the line and have you each say where your children decided to go. So Melissa, do you want to start?
Sure. Isley will be attending the University of Arizona.
Woo. Doug?
Mira will be attending Mount Holyoke College in Massachusetts.
Patty?
Lisa's going to University of Denver in Colorado and doing a gap year first in
Terrific.
Israel.
Excellent. Yeah, and I should mention we have right now, I think 9 seniors that have committed to a gap year, and we might have another 1 or 2 late breaking coming in. So yeah, so that has also been a part of the process. All right, so we're going to open it up for questions here, and I'm looking in the chat. There's a question about if your child is planning on attending community college for 2 years, is the ACT still required? I would say probably not. You don't need it for community college registration, just so you know, you really are sort of just signing up to be a student at a community college. There isn't much of a application process in that same way. I suppose there's a small chance that where they might think they want to transfer in 2 years might be interested in that test score, but we remain in such a test optional environment. And if they are thinking about the UCs or CSUs, which is a very well-tread path from a California community college, they don't want to see any test scores. So they're test free at this point. So I think there are probably better ways to spend your time senior year than working hard on that test score if you think community college may be the plan. So yeah. What else? Other questions? Feel free to unmute or pop them in the chat. I see we've got another question from Sharon. Thinking about essays, what will they be writing this month in their English classes? Can we get a list of prompts? Excellent question. So the assignment that I will be launching with everyone next week is to do a draft of the Common Application essay. So that is standard 650 word personal narrative that they will be, it's often like a story from their life or a story that's a launching point for saying something sort of larger about what's important to them, formative for them. The Common Application prompts, there are 7 of them. They are all online. So you can just Google now Common Application prompts and see what they look like. It's everything from, what's a challenge you faced and how you overcame it to, is there a piece of your identity that's so important and formative? Your application wouldn't be complete without it. I think the last question is make up your own question and write about it. So they have a lot of space, which is both great and can be unnerving if there's, I don't know where to start. So I have been starting to broach this with my juniors that have met with me already before we launch this in class, just to say, what are you thinking about? Do you have questions about this? Certainly after I launch it in classes, my subsequent meetings will talk about what they're thinking about writing. But know that we start this early because this is absolutely a draft. This is absolutely practice. Sometimes the first idea that comes to them is not a great one. I want you to not freak out about that. I know you'll probably be very eager later this month to be like, what did you decide to write about? Can I read it? And they may or may not want you to do that. And, that's fine. You can always contact me too and be like, what are they thinking about? I'm happy to be a back channel. But if you do read it and you're like, I don't think this is the best topic for you, don't worry, I will probably share that opinion and we'll workshop it out. Some students do land on something great and we end up kind of editing and working with that throughout the summer, and it may be what they actually submit next fall. I believe that was the case for Mira, as I'm kind of looking at Doug. I think what she started workshopping out in English class really worked for her. But often, we get to July, they reopen that document. They're like, this is kind of trash. We're going to start over. And that's fine too. So, so that's happening. And if your child, we do have some students that are thinking mostly about UCs. That's slightly different writing. They have 8 prompts and you choose 4 to respond to, and they're shorter responses. It's 350 words, I think. Sometimes if they would rather that be kind of the assignment in English class, then they could maybe do 1 or 2 of those if they don't think they're going to use the Common Application at all. But almost every student submits at least 1 Common Application because it is about 900 colleges, most of the private ones and a fair number of the public ones that aren't the UCs or CSUs. So that's the assignment. So question about any advice on what we should try to have them do this summer in preparation for applications next year. I'm actually going to turn that to our senior parents. Did any of you have your child working on this during the summer? Yeah, Melissa, go for it. Tell us.
Yeah, Isley started working on her personal statement over the summer, absolutely, which was great because I think she really conquered a large enough chunk of it to feel that she was in a good place when senior year started. I think she may have even started some of the other prompts for some of the other, the supplemental essays for some of her other applications as well. And I just wanted to echo something Doug said earlier with like EA applications or schools that are rolling. There is nothing better than just getting into a school and knowing like there's something next. So I completely agree with sort of that plan. But no, she 100% started stuff over the summer, the essays and reading applications and just sort of, and also just more research on each school and understanding if this really was the grouping of schools that she was interested in, or if, she needed to discuss other types of schools with Ms. Cook.
Yeah, and I'll just say I've been telling this to all your children, but the message doesn't always get home. I do work during the summer. I'm technically administration, not faculty. I do not have the summer off, which is also important because there's a lot of stuff that needs to get done, especially the summer before senior year. So I don't think I've put them up yet, but I will have still some Zoom appointments up online. I know folks are traveling and whatnot, but if you do want to check in once or twice, I would love that. And if your student is working on any writing and wants to share that Google Doc with me for feedback, that's what I'm here for. And I will also be sending fewer, but some important laser focused emails at different points during the summer about things to be working on. But that main application essay, I think is great to get locked down. And I do remember Isley in particular, I think I've just sent out to all of you a save the date for a senior college workshop that will be on Monday, August 14th. That's the date that athletic practices start again. I think theater rehearsals start again. So folks are starting to come back to school. It's not required, but I think it can be incredibly useful just generally for the students, but also to get them kind of locked back into college conversation if they were, you know, in the ether during the summer. I bring in college reps from some local schools. Doesn't have to be places your kids are interested in, but having them read writing and give some feedback from a current admission officer's perspective, and or do a mock interview with the admission officer so that they can start feeling comfortable interacting with these adults, getting some feedback on how they're doing. And it's low stakes because most of these are not places that your particular student may be considering. But I remember in particular, Melissa, that Isley came in with something pretty fully formed that day. And I remember very specifically, she and I sitting down, I thought the idea was great. We had a couple of tweaks to do. She showed it to some reps, and that's like the gold standard for getting stuff done. In terms of actually completing applications, just know that colleges right now are updating their application for the class of 2024. So some questions may come out, some questions may be added. All of that is finished and relaunched on August 1st for both the common application and the UC application. So if you go into those forms now, they're going to be mostly what they'll be on August 1st, but there may be some changes. So I don't generally feel like kids need to be making an account, logging in and starting to do that data entry, just because there may be some work that they didn't need to do, and there may be some additional work that appears on August 1st. So, but I'll be sending, obviously, reminders about when that's all open.
I wanted to really recommend that people go to that college fair that Ms. Cook is talking about. It was so helpful to I couldn't get Eliza to like focus on doing college tours. So it was great to have all those schools come and be able to speak to people individually who are representing the colleges. And someone who we met that day was like really one of the main reasons that we selected University of Denver based on the conversation that we had with him and what he said. And also just hearing from the admissions directors, and like they have you read different applications and who would you select and who would you reject and who would you put on a wait list. And it was really, really interesting to hear from their perspective, because they're looking for things. We have no idea what they're actually looking for. And that was really helpful. And I remembered at that point, like, oh, right, we're also interviewing them. Like they're sending out the applications, like they want us to say yes to them. They want our kids at their school. So it was a really good reminder, again, so contrary to everything that I had been reading, based on the college admissions process, that, you know, our children are the commodity, like they're, you know, they want them.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I think, Patty, you're talking about the case study program, which was actually last weekend, I think. And so a lot of folks, or maybe the weekend before, went to that, which is great. Let's see. I see you in bar. 1 second. I'm going to just address what's in the chat. Alex Fell asks, when does the list of schools they want to apply to need to be final? I generally have, it's around October 1st, unless that's a weekend this year. I'll have to look at the calendar, but October 1st-ish is when I want that applying list to be in SCORE. First of all, they just have to drag the tiles over. It's not super hard. And to be pretty final. We can do some tweaking after that point, especially around how they might apply, this early decision, early action, regular kind of stuff. But by October 1st, they really need to have a pretty set idea of their work. So if they haven't been, you know, doing some of this writing, that I can start help them prioritizing, all right, what are we banging out based on deadlines, and really trying to get things going, because November 1st is often the first deadline for early action or early decision schools, unless the school is rolling. And there's a handful of schools where you can submit your application anytime. But yeah, we're really gunning for very early October to have that kind of done. And then there's a question about, oh, we missed the event due to illness, the case study event. Yeah, so in terms of who got in, who was waitlisted, who was turned down, this was based by classroom. So there were gatherings of parents and students in various classrooms. And I think that the results often vary. There may be trend lines, in one classroom, that one student got in more than others. And I think they usually put a tally up in the gymnasium about what the trends look like. But part of the goal of that exercise is to show you that there isn't always like a right answer. It depends on the school. And there isn't sort of a silver bullet in terms of like, if you just do all of these things, you're definitely getting into college, right? Like, or to that specific college, that, that there's some nuance and that they're humans making decisions. So one piece of writing someone loves may be something another person is like, yeah, I don't care for it so much. And so there is some subjectivity, which I know can probably raise a little anxiety, but along with objectivity around GPA and all the rest. Imbar, you have your hand up. Thank you for waiting.
Yes, thank you. A couple of things, but my big question, I think Melissa mentioned something about it feels good to again to get into a college that you're going to say no to, because it's a good one. So I know this is an issue for some teenagers, and I'd love to hear yours and other parents, experienced parents, take on that issue of like, why would you apply to a college which you is probably not right for you? And I'm assuming that you, Ms. Cook, will be a big help in navigating the kids away from that. But since Melissa mentioned it, that's my big one question that I had.
Yeah.
Can I clarify?
Yeah.
It was not a matter of applying to a school that she wasn't interested in going to. It was more going through the process, getting into schools that she very much thought, she could see herself attending, and then being able to say, wait a minute, this is the school that I really most see myself at. And and what I was trying to, I guess, express was, there's something great about having the opportunity to say, I thought you were right for me, but through this process, I've learned you're not. You're not exactly what I thought you were. Or, I mean, I actually think, most schools, kids really will be happy at. You'll find your groove, you find your people, you find what you're going to study. But I meant more from the perspective of, there's a great feeling of, I really thought this was going to be the place for me. And I have realized through this process, my own growth, that it's not. So it wasn't a matter of applying. I would never advocate personally applying places that you really can't see yourself, because it's a lot of work, these applications. So even Common App, it's still a process. So yeah, did that answer that? Did that clarify that?
Well, I have a couple of comments too, because I see this happen with students on both sort of ends of the selectivity spectrum, that there are brand name schools that folks want to apply to because they love the idea of being affirmed by a highly selective place, being associated with what they think is a shiny, competitive, excellent brand. And I can't fault, we're human, like we do, we all like brands and selectivity and elitism, and, that comes up. But if the student can't write the why I want to attend this college essay on the Common Application, other than I've heard of Yale and it sounds really great, and I know it was on TV shows and it would make everyone feel like I'm super cool. Like, those are not reasons. And also, Yale is not going to choose you when you can't say anything discernible about Yale other than you've heard the name. So I will push back on kids that seem to have really highly selective places on their list for what I cannot find in digging around in their psyche a little bit with lots of questions for a reason beyond the brand name. So that is one thing. And I don't know if it's that they will end up saying no to it or not. We did have some students this year say no to what might have been a school that was higher ranked than the place that they chose, if you care about US News and World Report, but they were making choices about fit, which always makes me quite proud. Sometimes they're making choices about finances too, because some of these places, your prize is getting in. It's not necessarily that then they're going to give you money to be able to attend. But on the other end of the spectrum, you know, I am always going to push that their list includes likely and possible schools. And that's not because I don't think they can do it. You know, at a more selective place. It's that I want them to get into college. I want them to be given some merit aid awards, to have some financial range of choices. And because sometimes a likely or possible school, that specific place may be a better fit for them for something that's a reach school. And so trying to get them to get excited about those schools as well. And then feeling like it's okay to make the choice to go to the likely or possible school instead of something that might technically be more competitive. You know, it's a thing. It's something we workshop out. So yeah, I hope that addressed some of, it's a long and nuanced question. Yeah. Oh, I'm jumping to a couple of things in the chat. So Ellen, you asked what other demonstrated interest do you recommend? So again, not every school cares about demonstrated interest, but some definitely do sort of keep a running tally of your interaction with them to, and that may play a role in whether if the student is kind of on the borderline between an admit or a wait list and a deny, to give them the more positive decision, the thinking that you are more likely to enroll if you've interacted with them a lot. So I would say, you know, at a minimum, they do track if you're like opening emails. And so if you aren't able to visit somewhere, even just interacting online, whether that's going to an online info session or whatnot, you get kind of some bonus points for that. But going on a visit to the campus, going to a visit at JCHS in the fall, anytime they ask you to like scan the QR code or fill the little thing out with your name and address, if you did any of that at the case studies program 2 weeks ago, that's all demonstrated interest. So above and beyond that, you know, sometimes there are organic reasons to engage an admission rep in some emails or, you know, and maybe try and set up an appointment to ask them some more specific questions. That's fine, but you don't want to do that if it's inauthentic, right? You don't want to just be trying to be present with the admission rep for the purpose of being present with them. And as we get into lists, I can also help if your student is looking at a place where I know demonstrated interest plays a big role. Like Tulane is super transparent about that. You know, do all the things. So if Tulane is on the list, we may talk about demonstrated interest differently than if UC Davis is the #1 choice, because they don't care about any of that. So it depends a little bit on the schools we're talking about. We had a question about UCs in the chat. Just curious if a UC still didn't notify a student who is on their wait list of a positive admission decision. Is that likely a non-admission decision? Interesting. So question about wait lists and kind of what happens. A lot of folks, when you get your wait list notification that you didn't quite make the cut, but your application's still sort of sitting with us and we may act on it, they will often tell you the wait list will close on like July 30th. And you think, well, that's bananas. They are giving themselves the longest runway possible for still maybe making a call to you about a place in the class. But generally, you know, May 1st is a really hard date for colleges as well. They are frantically during the month of April, every day, looking at how many admission deposits have come in and comparing that with past year's data to see, are they close to making their enrollment goals? Are things a little under? Are things way over? And, you know, sometimes even a couple days before May 1st, if they're looking under enrolled, they may start making waitlist offers. But if it's May 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and they're over enrolled or they're looking pretty good, they may go ahead and release their wait list at some point in those coming weeks. Now, there's always like a pause period. We're in that pause period right now to see about what I think of as like a domino effect. Because let's say Yale, our brand name school example today, is under enrolled. Yale may go to their wait list. And then kids that had committed other places and now commit to Yale, those schools may say, it's May 10th, oh, well, now I need to go to my wait list to fill a couple of those spots. And it on down the kind of college pyramid pecking order. So May, you know, it would be unusual for a school to totally release their wait list, but most places that want to be humane to their applicants will let them know before that, like July 30th date, that like we're now closed, the wait list is closed. Thank you so much for hanging in there, and you're not going to get an admission offer. And so so that's really kind of a deny, I suppose. But some places are not humane, unfortunately, or so big, you know, and have so much bureaucracy going on that they never send that email. So I really encourage students that we have made a decision by May 1st with the choices in front of you. And if other opportunities come up, or if we hear that a school is going to the wait list that you're really excited about, maybe you go and try and take a tour there just in case that offer comes, but that we really want you to get committed to and invested in the places that want you. And if there's kind of a bonus round later on, like, great. There is a question about why are so many kids doing gap years? Do they get in and then defer? Is it COVID related? Curious, since 9 kids out of a smallish class seems like a lot. Yeah, so I will just state again, because it's in my job title, that JCHS, since we were founded, has really placed a premium on at least educating around the gap option. Nobody is pushed into it, but that it's part of the culture to be considering this. And it's for 2 reasons for us in particular. One is that, of course, gap years are great for growth, for independence, for all of that kind of maturation that can happen before you go off to do what is this increasingly expensive venture for 4 years. But also it is in the JCHS mission that our students develop a connection with the land of Israel. And so of those 9 gap years right now, 8 of them are going to Israel. 1 is doing what sounds like a fabulous sort of global trotting the world that's going to end with some Spanish immersion, Spanish language instruction. But most of those are going to spend time in Israel. Some of them are religious. We have a couple of folks going to yeshivas or seminaries. Most are not. Most are doing service internships. You know, there will be, of course, some religious, you know, founding of Israel kind of history, but there's a great diversity of things. So that's why, and this is actually not an atypical number. We will often have somewhere around a quarter, sometimes as much as a third of the class doing a gap year. And most of them, in fact, I think all of them except 1, because she's thinking she'll probably reapply to some schools during the gap year, have, you know, are planning to defer and then, you know, go on to their chosen school after 1 year. So that's the gap year piece. And then
Can I ask a question? Sorry to barge in, but you just touched a question that I wanted to ask about. So applying and then going to do a gap year. I understand the reasons for applying, even if you're planning to go to a gap year. I wonder, how, from your experience, how many kids end up reapplying, changing their choices due to their experiences, the experience that and maturing that they have gotten during the gap year?
Great question. In fact, I got an email yesterday from someone in the class of 2022 who has been doing a year of public service in Israel and had deferred a school in Massachusetts and has decided she is not coming back. So she, you know, she wants to stay in Israel. And so that probably every year, there might be one that is least wanting to Zoom with me and grapple with that question if they've not fully made a decision. Every couple of years, someone might have done a Mahina, which is a great way to interact with Israelis. It's usually the prep program for Israelis to be going into the army. And so every couple of years, one of our students will do that and then decide, you know what, I am going to join the IDF. So there is, you know, a little bit of a wild card element. And there might be one student every year that thinks about reapplying to some schools. We did have one from the class of 2022 who kind of rolled snake eyes last year. Great, you know, student, and it just didn't quite work out with her list. I think it was unfortunate, but also some of this can get a little random. She'd planned on doing a gap year, so she reapplied this year. I helped with some of that, and she just enrolled at UC San Diego. So it all really depends, but I'd say the vast majority of folks go do their program, commit to a school, and come back and go to that school they committed to after the year. That's pretty traditional. There's a question about if we weren't able to schedule a tour at a college, what's our next best step? Start at admission office. Yes. So sometimes, folks are still in some schools really limiting tour size, whether that's COVID policy or the way that their campus is set up. I know like Santa Cruz, you have to book many weeks in advance because they put you on a bus at the admission office and go up the hill on the bus. And there's only so many seats on the bus to get to the actual campus. So I would say still show up at the admission office, see if they have a self-guided tour. Oftentimes they have something where like you can little scan QR codes around the campus or whatnot. Sometimes they'll say, oh, there's just 2 of you. We can sneak you on, because there might be no shows. People's plans change. They get ill. They decide after 6 schools in a row, they cannot fathom doing the 7th. So I would still go to admission and just say, we're visiting from California or wherever. And, what can we do to see the campus? Sometimes they might give you like a free lunch coupon, go eat in the dining hall or something. So to Patty's point, they are wooing you. Your child is important to them. And see if you can do an info session online. Those are obviously limitless, and that would at least give you some exposure to some of the basics of the school, their educational plan, and often there might be a student or someone that's participating in that as well. What else? It's 8:53. Other questions?
I have a question. I find the scattergrams on Score super helpful, especially for knowing what our kids get into, what schools. When do you update those for 2023?
Yeah, so Score will, I think, do an auto update on July 1st. I think that's when they officially roll the class of 2024 into being seniors and make 2023 alums. So then the alums will show up for the data points there. Because yeah, I think they can be very helpful, especially at schools where a lot of folks have applied. Sometimes if it's a smaller number, the data won't show up. So we want to get the most recent apps in there as soon as possible. But yeah, middle of the
It's
summer.
really helpful for the UCs, I think, which our kids don't seem to do so well on. Can you comment as to why that is?
So I would adjust that statement a little bit, edit that statement a little bit, because if you look at the numbers writ large, and there actually was something in the Chronicle a few weeks ago that several of you emailed me about, or other people at school, where you can, it's public college, it's transparent data. If you go into the UC website and look at high school by high school admission rates, we actually, if you look at percentage of who the UC is applying and percentage of our applicants that get in from JCHS, like we're generally doing better than their average stats. And in some cases doing better from some of our brand name peers in the city. So writ large, I think we're hanging in there in a more selective environment. Does that matter to an individual student that didn't get in to the UC they wanted, or maybe multiple UCs they wanted? Of course not. The narrative is like, nothing good is happening here. To be clear, the past 2 years, since moving to being test-free, since COVID, since all sorts of things, those applicant pools have ballooned at the UCs. And I was at a hotel bar with the director of admission, UCLA, at my conference 2 weeks ago. It's 10 at night. He's being a little looser with his, lips and talking about, college by college, just how low the admit rates were this year. And he just seemed like a deer in headlights. Like he couldn't believe how many applications they're getting and how UCLA is not growing, exponentially. And so, yeah, so that nobody is in love with this scenario that's happening right now, but everybody's trying to do the best they can with it. I will really encourage your kids to pay attention when I put predictions on their list. I don't want them beating their heads against a wall trying to apply to a Berkeley or a UCLA or a San Diego when the stats indicate that it's just not going to happen. And that is a hard conversation. And I really try to be as good of a bad cop as I can in delivering some of this reality news. But I also don't want you all to just be setting $70 on fire wantonly with each of these applications. But, there are things we can do and ways we can frame that application. And again, really encouraging your kids, and I will as well, to not wait until the last minute to do that UC writing, to finish that activities list. The thing with the UCs is that there are no recommendation letters, there's no outside voices in that application. It's all on what the student is requested to do. And so I want to help them as much as I can, because I have done reader training at the UCs. I do have a sense of right and wrong ways to fill some of this stuff out. And so they also, if I think they've got a shot, need to be partnering with me as much as possible. And sometimes that's what happens too, is that someone just kind of rushes some piece of the application. And, you know, we need things to be sort of as perfect as possible. So they play a role in doing some good planning with that as well, and really working with me. So, yeah. Any other questions? Getting close to 9. Anything else for our senior parents? Yeah,
I had a
Daniel.
question. So when I was at the event 2 weeks ago with Ari, I saw it was really eye-opening, and certainly if it was San Francisco parents making decisions, I think it was pretty universal which student got selected, but I thought that was very eye-opening as well. But one thing that was interesting is that there's a school profile that's also part of the packet. And is that something that's public, or I'm just curious, like what does the JCHS profile look like?
Yeah, so it's actually on the College Advising JCHS website. So not behind the login to JCHS. So there's a little section of the College Advising website that says for admission reps. And it has, like, you know, how to book a visit at JCHS, you know, how to contact me, and then the JCHS profile. So I do update that every summer, but you can look and see what it was for this past year. I try and keep it brief. Some places do a glossy 8-page spread with photos of campus and all of that, you know, and as an admission rep, I really just wanted the nuts and bolts, you know, a 1-page, 2-sided thing. So on there, you've got a couple of snippets about our graduation requirements, a little bit about journeys and Jewish studies curriculum and the things that are, you know, unique to us. It does list our whole curriculum so they can see the AP classes, kind of progressions in each academic discipline. Now, also know that I put in every recommendation letter that JCHS is small and has a limited number of advanced courses, and scheduling stuff may mean that what a student wants to do is not always what they're able to take. And I do, again, I have a blurb that I want every student to put on the UC application that says that as well, since I can't say that to them. And then it has a list of where students have been accepted in the last 5 years, and it's bolded where students have enrolled. So contextually, they get some sense of things. So feel free to check that out and know that that's last year's data. And so I'll have a new one up probably mid-July. Yeah.
But Ms. Cook, this is Daniel Zilberman, Mark's parent. I think just de facto, based on what we saw, you know, with Mark and his friends sort of across the board, UCs don't seem to be favoring our school that much, just kind of de facto, because not so many kids got in with, you know, otherwise pretty good academic and extracurricular background. I don't know how to explain this, but this is just a fact.
Well, I will say the fact is that, say, UCLA, which they haven't printed yet, but has like a 7% admit rate, and our admit rate there was something like 10%. So I do think factually, when you disaggregate the data, we're still doing well. We are either on par with what's happening across for California residents, or a little bit above it. But when you have 25 kids applying,
right,
you know, forget it. Like,
the
it's
small subsection, right?
Yeah. And we have to remember that this is about the entire state, and about them also placing the increased emphasis on trying to be as equitable across counties and high schools and all of that as possible. It is a much bigger picture than just the city of San Francisco or whatnot. But as those applicant pools have gotten bigger, do we have fewer people getting in? Absolutely. They're also admitting fewer people, right? So these things are running parallel to each other, but it's tough. I know it is 9:01. I want to just see if Miss Ari can ask her question. She's put her hand up several times, and then we're gonna go. But yes.
The list you gave us on SCORE is extensive. And I'm just hoping that outside of this, as we're going to travel this summer, which ones, if I can talk to you about that, we really should see, because this is, kind of crazy. So that
100%. I would really recommend, because I do throw a lot at the wall on that initial list, expecting that some aren't going to fly and some may catch and others will come in. Please look at my schedule on my Google appointment calendar. And if you don't know where that is, email me and I'll make sure I send it to you. I'm happy to chat about some strategies for visits because you don't have to see everything. Some places can stand in for others if you're able to group just, you know, a couple of convenient locations. And I also want to make sure that visits are not going to be 100% to reach schools. Right? They need to also see some places that want them, that they're going to get in, because it's easy to find a good list of reaches you want to apply to. It's harder to find likelies and possibles because it's the human thing of why do I want someone that wants me? So if you can see it, you can get on that campus. It's going to make it a more likely that everyone's excited when you get in. So.
I will be emailing you. Thank you.
Please do.
Okay.
All right. And with that, we're going to close things out. Thank you to our senior parents. I'm so excited that y'all are mostly done with this process, other than some paperwork and the first bill. And I appreciate everyone's time this morning. And we'll send another recording out once Mr. McDonald can process this. So have a good weekend.
Thank you so
Bye,
much.
everyone.
Thank you.